I just finished interviewing FullyRaw Kristina. What an amazing experience. You are definitely going to want to watch this episode. Number one, to hear her life story, how basically a medical condition not only transformed her own health, but her own life. And number two, you're going to want to get some tips on how to put a raw vegan diet into practice if you have Alzheimer's or any other chronic condition. This is Dr. Josh, Peace and Plants. Kristina Carrillo-Bucaram, known to millions as FullyRaw Kristina, is a raw vegan health advocate, best-selling author, speaker, and founder of the Rawfully Organic Co-op. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Kinesiology and Health Sciences from Rice University, where she specialized in health promotion and disease prevention. Diagnosed with hyperglycemia and early onset type 2 diabetes at the age of 18, Kristina rejected conventional medication and instead adopted a fully raw plant-based diet. Within months, she reversed her condition and has remained medication-free for over 18 years. Through her YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers, her best-selling book, The Fully Raw Diet, and her global wellness platform, Kristina has inspired millions to use food as medicine. Her work bridges the gap between metabolic health and cognitive longevity, offering natural strategies for reversing insulin resistance and preventing degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Her mission to empower individuals to heal from the inside out using vibrant living foods and a radical return to nature. Kristina, welcome to my podcast. And yeah, I'm such a huge fan of what you've done.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here today and excited. And I've recently had the honor and pleasure of getting to meet you and have absolutely become so inspired by your work and more. And so when you asked me to come on, I was like, absolutely, let's do this.
Cool. And Kristina, can you pronounce your last name? It's I want to make sure I get it right.
Carrillo-Bucaram.
Carrillo-Bucaram. Yeah,
you don't need to say my last name
okay.
in this interview, I don't think.
Cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. So obviously this is an Alzheimer's podcast, and the reason I thought you would be an amazing person to interview is that one of the root causes for many cases of Alzheimer's is either diabetes or insulin resistance. And I know that you have a very personal story when it comes to diabetes and insulin resistance. And well, first of all, have you ever been interviewed by a physician about your own personal journey with diabetes?
With diabetes, yes. Someone who specializes in Alzheimer's, no. And I've never been interviewed by you, which is the most important thing. And, I'm happy to share my diabetes journey, but I do just want to share briefly that this is a very personal thing to me because my great-grandmother had Alzheimer's. And, I'm excited to learn from you and I'm excited to dive into this conversation because I think the message of what we're going to be conveying in this interview is that food and what you put into your body and wellness and exercise as well play such a huge part in impacting your mental health as well, and can really impact how you show up later in life with these things. And so, yeah, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in my early younger teens. Like I started seeing effects when I was 14. And by the time I was 16, was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was hyperglycemic, meaning like I had super high blood sugar all the time, not hypo, which is where you have low blood sugar. And it changed my life as a teenager, needless to say. And considering that I never grew up on junk food. So it's easy for someone to say, oh, you must have grown up on fast food and junk food and candies. And the truth is that I didn't. I grew up on home cooked Lebanese and Ecuadorian food every night. But now looking back on it, I really do believe that the problems that I was, facing with food is that I was just on a high fat meat diet all the time. It's people assume that the Mediterranean diet is so healthy, but when you're actually culturally there, it's really more about meat and olive oil and meat and olive oil and hummus and beans and chicken and rice, and those were the staples. I don't remember. I mean, I can name a few times in my childhood where I ate a salad, just a few, or a few times in my childhood where I ate fruit. The person who was always eating fruit was my grandpa, Jido, and he's now 101. So it's interesting that I grew up on a very high fat diet, and I do believe that that's how I was diagnosed and how I encountered these blood sugar issues so early, but also as a young girl. And, we're seeing this more and more in our younger populations. Like younger kids are developing earlier, especially girls, like their bodies are becoming, more developed earlier. All the hormones in the foods, all these things. I definitely was experiencing that. But, specific to diabetes, high and low blood sugar spells, mainly high spells all the time, uh, chronic migraines every single day, fainting spells, chronic constipation. I would go to the restroom maybe once a week and thought that was normal, sometimes once every 2 weeks. When you're hyperglycemic, you burn through sugar so much because your blood sugar is so high. So I became extremely thin. I could go on forever. But as a teenager, I think something that really impacted me was my confidence around my friends and my energy level. I was a smart little chicken back then, and I had one of the highest GPAs in my class, and I almost didn't graduate high school because I had so many sick days. You think about how that impacts you as a young teenage girl, your ability to make friends and hang out with people, and it changed my life. And so when I was 18, um, I found raw food, right? A person, a stranger in a grocery store came up and started talking to me about raw food. It was pretty obvious though, because I think, this person was trying to help me, and I had an IV patch in my arm. I had just gotten out of the hospital, and they started telling me about juicing and raw food, and I listened, right? It's interesting because I had actually gone back into the hospital the day after that. I was not feeling well. But 3 days later, when I got out, I just remember feeling that I had hit rock bottom at 18 years old, thinking, I don't know what I will do if the rest of my life is like this. Like, can you imagine being 18 and thinking, I'm going to be getting shots and sick and having IVs for the rest of my life like this? It was an extremely depressing thought, and I felt like I had had no control over anything in my life. And so I'd never tried anything alternative before, ever. And so when this person told me about raw food, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this. So I went raw vegan in one night, and I never looked back. Now, granted, I had lots to learn on that journey, but I took it day by day. Um, the person who encountered me in the grocery store became my mentor, actually. I called him up and I said, hey, I know nothing about this, but if you'd be willing to mentor me, I'll show up and I'll give it 110%. And that's what happened. And so I had a lot to learn about knowing what to eat and how many calories to eat and how to make sure I was getting in enough calorie, all these things. It took me, about a month to get right, but I'll never forget the beginning of my story really was me going into a Whole Foods and buying 100 pounds of peaches, and I monomealed on peaches for the first 2 weeks of my journey. Nothing else but peaches, just so I could learn how to eat the fruit, eat enough. And I'll never forget, within my first 3 days of just monomealing peaches, my blood sugars began to stabilize, like just the beginning of that. I didn't have a migraine. I didn't feel like I wanted to faint. It was unbelievable to me because here I was for years being told by doctors, don't eat this, don't eat that, only eat processed, diabetic approved, sugar-free foods that came in a package that were wrapped. And so it's like, I actually feel like I got worse in that time because I went from actually eating home cooked meals to only eating diabetic sugar-free foods in plastic wrapped packages that were actually even more processed than what I was eating. And I just got worse. And so what's interesting is that I got better by eating the one thing doctors were telling me not to eat, which was
Right.
fruit.
Right.
Which was fruit.
Which is ironic. And again, I've got to say, having been through medical school, medical education, and also having 2 degrees in biochemistry. So I would consider myself a very well-trained physician in the area of metabolism, including diabetes. And unfortunately, there were some glaring deficiencies in my own education, specifically if you eat whole fruit that actually stimulates insulin sensitivity. So it wasn't by accident that if you're eating just a bunch of peaches, of whole fruit, that is actually going to be really good in terms of making you sensitive to insulin and decreasing your diabetes at the time.
I had to learn a lot about it too. So for instance, now that it's wild to think that that was when I was 18. I'm 38 now. So actually my 20-year raw vegan anniversary is July 15th. I know that day because it was the one day I went raw and never went back. And so I will have been raw 20 years in July, which is more than half my life now, which is crazy to think I've been doing this more than half my life. But I really do believe one of the reasons that this worked so well for me is because I went completely fruitarian in the beginning and I did no fat. I don't think it would have been possible for me to have those same results if I had done like high fat, high fruit. I think me keeping it as simple as possible was what really helped me get back on track. And so, my journey has evolved as a raw vegan. I was fruitarian for almost a decade, like, and very strict to a T to it. And I thrived. I loved it. And then around 7 or 8 years in, I started incorporating salt, a few more nuts and seeds. And then, as it evolved from there, I started my purpose and my mission with raw food changed. And it was more so that I wanted to bring more people into this world. But I knew not very many people were going to want to do fruitarian. So it was like, you know what? I can make that Lebanese recipe raw vegan. I can make that recipe raw vegan. And so I did start using more nuts and seeds and salts and spices and garlics and things into my recipes. And since my body had already rebuilt from a foundation, it's like now I can eat all those things with no problem. And just to give everybody a preface, it took me a year and a half to completely reverse my type 2 diabetes. So by the time that I was 21, mid 21, I was off everything. No insulin, completely. Well, actually, I was off insulin a long time before that, but I could officially say that I was free of being a diabetic, which was incredible for me. And then it changed my life so much that I changed my college major. I changed my direction in life. I was like, that's it. I'm going to do this for life. I want to share this message with people.
Yeah.
So
So you went to undergraduate at Rice,
I
and
did.
what
And
major
Vanderbilt.
what major did you end up switching to?
Well, I believe it or not, this always makes people giggle, but I had a full ride for ceramics in the beginning. I wanted to be a ceramicist and an artist and a potter. I love ceramics and I was very good at it. And so I ended up still getting my degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree with a specialty in ceramics, but I ended up adding on kinesiology with a specialization in health sciences, which is, the study of movement in the body, and then tagging on along food in there as well. Health science can be a multitude of different things, epidemiology, as you know. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing. And interestingly enough, when, when I was in college, I started the first farmers market on campus at Rice. And it was pretty interesting how this happened. It was just me and a few other kids. And they're like, Kristina, you should be the president. Let's start a farmers market on campus. I was like, what? And even though something as random as that I took on ended up becoming my next 10 years of life, like that little farmer's market ended up turning into me owning my own chain of farmers markets in Houston. And it really became the beginning of my career. I called it Raw Fully Organic, and we had 3 locations. We served Houston. We served over 50,000 people in the Houston area. And not only was it a blast, but it was completely volunteer run. It was community run. We supported farmers. It was just, I think it was like the best thing that Houston had ever experienced in terms of getting real food. It was closed in 2016, and I, went on to the next part of my journey. But most people don't know this, but I called my co-op Raw Fully Organic because we would put together these huge boxes of raw organic produce for people to buy at a wholesale cost so they could make as much raw food recipes as they wanted. They could juice and do all these things. But from that was born Fully Raw. Raw, fully raw are the words flipped, Kristina. And I started a YouTube channel teaching people how to make raw vegan recipes.
And since
So
then, you've gone viral, and you're definitely a personality, and you've touched the lives of millions of people, which is amazing. But let's go back to the beginning. What were some of your first symptoms when you got diabetes as a teenager? You were what, about 14?
yes, about 14. My first symptoms were blackout migraines. I will never forget those. And I think in the beginning it was just, oh, go to the nurse's office and take a nap at school. But then they started happening all the time, and then it's like when I got blackout migraines, it was like, oh, I feel like fainting. And, you know, I would feel so hungry all the time. But I also felt, you know, dizziness, chronic constipation all the time. I would say those were my first symptoms, and then obviously it evolved into other things. For some people, those might not sound like a lot, but those things kept me from doing normal things like playing sports in school, operating at a normal function. Like I really wanted to be on the swim team. Couldn't be on the swim team with sugar spikes like that and being in water. And, blackout migraines, can't be in the water swimming when you're experiencing those types of things. So blackout migraines are very debilitating is what I remember from the
Right.
beginning.
And let's
Um,
let's go over for the audience what's actually going on behind the scenes causing that. So we now know, first of all, that the major cause for diabetes turns out to be too much fat, which basically gums up the normal insulin receptors. So at the time you were 14, you were eating a traditional Lebanese or Ecuadorian diet, which, as you mentioned, had high levels of fat from animal products mainly. And we also know that migraine headaches are caused by inflammation in the brain. So what was happening was your blood sugars were going up because of the excess fat, and that increased blood sugar was causing the inflammation that your own body told you, hey, there's a headache, and you, it sounds like, did you actually black out, or you almost blacked out from it?
I would typically black out if they got really bad. And so if I could start to sense when they were getting bad. So that's when I would go to the nurse's office and I would pass out in minutes, and I would spend a couple hours sleeping in the nurse's office. And by that time, it was time to go home. School was over. So I spent a lot of time in the nurse's office. And really, eventually, that turned into me not going to school at all, you know, and having a sick day because I would wake up feeling that way. And then, the rest of the day would gone. So it was gone. So yeah.
Wow. And I know you saw the school nurse, but did you ever see a doctor during that period to try to figure out what's going on?
Eventually we did go see a nurse in the Texas Medical Center, actually. My parents took me to a doctor in the Texas Medical Center, and, you know, she immediately diagnosed me and wanted to put me on all the things, on insulin and this. And actually, it was a really scary time for me because she was also trying to convince my mom that I had other things and that, oh, I was just a teenage girl. And maybe she's not eating the right things at school around her friends. She brought in all these other things and, about being a teenage girl that had nothing to do with it, that made me feel very insecure. So I actually learned very quickly that I didn't like this doctor. She didn't make me feel safe. And truth be told, I didn't have that many friends anyway. So it was like, I don't know. It was a really tough experience for me, extremely frightening. It's definitely something I felt very alone in navigating. And as a teenage girl, and especially with, you've met my beautiful parents. It's like,
They're amazing.
they're very
Yeah.
ethnic,
Right.
so they don't understand teenage America, high school, those things. To them, very different. They don't understand that, they understand how they grew up. So yeah.
So how did so the first doctor you saw basically blamed you for the condition, and how did you eventually get a diagnosis of blood sugar or diabetes?
They diagnosed me at the Texas Medical Center there with
Okay.
that doctor.
Okay.
Yes, and I thought she was my only doctor at that time for about a year and a half, and she'd recommended me to a few other people, but, my parents, I think when you're that young, and keep in mind this was 20 years ago, people weren't thinking to go get a second opinion. If you went to the doctor, that was the one doctor you saw, and that word was law. And she was my doctor. And also because I was under 18, it wasn't like I had an adult doctor. She was like a still pediatric doctor for people my age. So yeah, she was the only doctor I'd seen at the time.
Got it. And then she started you on insulin, or what happened there?
Some months later, actually it was, because I was past 16 at that time. So I'd say from when I was 17 to 18 is when I was started. Yeah.
Got it. And did they give you any other options besides insulin, or they're like, no, you have to do insulin?
No, she just told me don't eat anything that has sugar in it. She was very clear to only eat things that said sugar free,
Okay.
no fruits, no sweets, no ice, like all the things. And so I did it. The one thing that I remember eating a lot of that made it way worse for me is I got really into eating sugar-free granola. That became my thing. That became the one thing that I was like, oh, well, it's sugar-free, it's granola, I can take it with me everywhere. So I remember from when I was 17 to 18, like I ate so much sugar-free granola, but it made me so sick. And now that I look back on it, it was the worst choice ever to do for
Right.
that. It was
Because we know that most granolas are actually high in oil or fat.
and gluten
Yes.
and all the things. It was bad choice.
Bad
Nobody
choice.
said anything to me.
Got it. And,
Yeah.
and and how often would you take the insulin?
I don't remember. I definitely, at one point it was every day,
Well,
but I think in the beginning it was less frequent than that.
okay.
What I do remember is trying really, really hard to make my high school graduation. I went through a period where it was like I had a goal that I wanted to graduate so I could, because I actually had like the highest GPA in my class, and it was like, oh, I wasn't going to be able to give the valedictorian speech. It was like really devastating for me, but I wanted to go to the ceremony. And so I ended up still being able to give a speech, not the valedictorian speech, but they let me stand up and speak. And I just remember like working really hard and doing whatever the doctors told me to do at that point so I could be at my graduation. Yeah. So, what's interesting is that so much of the last few months of that part of my journey were a blur. And I feel like the second I found raw food and found hope, it's like from that point on, I started remembering everything past that. And I know that might sound weird to people, but I was also extremely depressed at that time, and sleeping a lot and in bed a lot. And when I wasn't doing that, I was just trying to get my homework done. And also, I was 18. I was so young.
Right.
And, it was 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, it's a while ago. So we also know that one of the root causes of depression is inflammation of the brain. Did your headaches your migraines go away once your
They
sugars were on?
did.
Yeah.
It took a while though. Like I said, I started feeling better within 3 days of eating raw food, but
Okay.
realistically, it probably took about 3 to 4 months for things to like really balance out. But I knew that things were balancing out because every single day I was feeling a little bit better. I could do more. It's sometimes when you're so in so much pain, it's like very tiny shifts are things that you notice that you feel better by. And so I think what kept me going, even though sometimes it felt like 4 steps forward and 2 steps back, is that I kept improving. So I just kept moving forward in that process.
Wow.
You know?
And what strikes me is, the reaction of your doctor was to start you on insulin, which is the standard treatment. But if you look historically, 100 years ago or a little bit more, insulin wasn't available as a treatment. The way that patients were treated with diabetes were actually two different ways. One was calorie restriction, maybe only 500 calories a day, or related would be basically a vegan diet with no added fat. Because at the time there was no insulin to give someone. But with those types of diets, diabetics would get better. Their symptoms would get better. So it's interesting that in modern times you were given insulin and then instructions to basically eat lots of sugar-free processed foods. Yeah.
That's really interesting. In going back and thinking about that, I was very, very skinny. So by the time that I was 18 and found raw foods, because, I was going in and out of the hospitals a lot. I'm 5'6" now. I was probably about 5'5" then. I was 87 pounds. And I just remember one of the meanest things that the doctor had told me is that she also thought that like I had an eating disorder. And so, it's not like she was going to tell me to fast or do this as an 18-year-old, and, I just remember, it was just so mean. I went through phases where I would hear the doctor say this and I would go home and I would like try and stuff my face to put on the weight, but like my blood sugar was just burning through everything so fast. So it's like I think that also contributed to my depression at the time. And also looking at it, yeah, just in how everything is handled, the amount of care that goes into I think that we've gotten into a modern day time where people are given blanket recommendations by doctors instead of actually taking the time to sit and be very personalized with them or give them options. Asking the person, what do you feel comfortable with? Which way would you like to go? What would feel most inspiring to you? And I'm sure you've seen this as well, but in seeing so many people go on their health journeys, something that I've seen with people is if someone really believes that something will heal them, it's most likely like that thing will most likely heal them. The power of belief is so strong in this, and so even just having doctors have the conversation of, well, what might feel good to you? How can I support you in this? Let me add in what I know into this conversation to see if we can come up with the best plan for you, type of a thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's so true. And one of the dangers I see when I work with patients who are diabetic and then change their diet, whether it's to just eating plants or just eating fruit, is the danger is if they're on insulin or another medication lowering their blood sugar, and you put them on a healthier diet for their blood sugar, their blood sugar can drop dramatically, and it's actually more dangerous to have a very low blood sugar than a high blood sugar. Was your doctor working with you to lower your insulin when you started this fruitarian approach?
So you're probably going to disapprove of this, and I'm definitely probably going to get some comments about this. But, once I turned 18 and I went raw, because I went raw shortly after I turned 18, I became a bit defiant with my parents and I didn't want to go back to the doctor because I started feeling better. And so she's not the one who weaned me off insulin. I started slowly refusing to take it with, my parents. And it really upset my mother primarily. And, I went through some very, very deep feelings of feeling like I had been betrayed or that I had to unlearn everything. Like, imagine me just like going through this journey from when I was 14 to 18 as a young girl, being told all these things and all of a sudden going raw, and all of a sudden I'm eating fruit and I was starting to feel better. I feel like I'd been lied to my whole life, right? I felt like, oh my gosh, this like nobody's talking about this. And here, food, the real food is making me feel better. It wasn't just me feeling better, it was a full blown awakening. And my parents could not get me to go back to that doctor if they tried. And it was not happening. And so I really did it on my own. It created a lot of friction between me and my parents, but I was feeling better, like better than I ever had been. So it was like, I don't want to go back to her and her tell me that don't need to be doing this when I'm feeling better. So it very much, and also when I turned 18 is I graduated high school and I was going to college. So for me, it was like, I don't have to hang around here. I'm going to
Right.
college. Please.
Right. Don't have to worry about it. Did you still check your blood sugars to make sure they
All
were?
the time. All the time. Yeah. And to be honest, in the beginning, it was all over the place. And there were moments where I was kind of scared doing it on my own. But then once I kind of got the hang of doing it, I was like, oh, you know what? I got this. And that's why I said, I think one of the really key factors that helped me in the beginning that I wasn't even aware about at the time because I didn't know the science behind it was I was just fruitarian and I wasn't eating any fat. I think one of the reasons I had such ease and success is I was just doing fruit all day and my body went immediately into this cleanse phase, like, going from eating all this processed food to just cleansing hardcore. I just took it day by day. And I think that that's something that I like to make sure I tell people is that it wasn't an overnight thing. It, you know, I ate fruit for 2 weeks, and then when I felt more comfortable, I started to incorporate more different kinds of fruit and then some salads. And I tell people I was an 18-year-old living in Texas at the time, Houston. I barely knew how to make a salad. It was like I had no knowledge of these things. It was against my culture, my family, everything I knew, everything I'd grown up with. And so there were so many fruits that I had barely even tried. Like, did I even try a plum growing up? And then here I was trying to make a meal out of plums, learning what monomealing was, learning how to eat enough. And there were some things that were definitely frightening about it because it was like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Am I crazy? Everyone thought I was crazy. But then there were other parts where it was like, actually, no, I feel better and I feel so inspired. And I think what kept me going was that I felt really good and I finally felt like I'd found something that was working for me, despite what anyone else was thinking. And so it became this journey of me unlearning everything that I had ever been told. And I was relearning with the most basics of things, fruits and vegetables. And, it took a year and a half to completely reverse the diabetes. But the truth is I started feeling really, really good about 6 months into my journey. And, when I talk to people who are much later on in their journeys, like I have so many people who come to me or come to you who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're like, I'm going to go raw vegan and I'm going to reverse all my health issues in 1 week or 1 month. And I'm like, oh, like one week is, I don't know about that. 1 month, maybe. I was like, but what I try to explain to people is if it took me a year and a half at the age of 18 to reverse all the damage that had been done to my body at the time, and I was like young, it's like, imagine when you are 30, 40, 50, 60, it's going to take even more time to rebuild that foundation. It's like, it takes time to rebuild that. There's no magic pill. And I think, a beauty of raw food is that you actually have to relearn, unlearn, reintegrate, make it a part of your daily routine. You actually have to do these things. There's no magic pill that's going to do all of this for you. It actually pulls into account responsibility and accountability and changing your life. Like it actually invites you to come in to a new way of being and change what you're doing, change your life. And we've lost that discipline in modern day society. People want quick, they want efficient, they just want the pain to be over and done. They don't want to try and like change things and work with their body for months at end. This is why I think, you know, I think that the medical system has taken that and has like used it to their advantage in a way. You know, oh, if you just take this painkiller, it'll all be gone in one night. Or if you just do this treatment, then you can just keep living your life as you want. Or if you just take this insulin, you can keep eating all the burgers and fries that you want and live a normal teenage life. You know, I was told that. I know so many teens now who are being diagnosed and who are told that. I even know, Dr. Josh, I'm going to say off the top of my head this year, over 5 people who were past the age of 26 who have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Type
Wow.
1, who've been put on insulin and said, oh, lifestyle doesn't matter and just eat whatever you want, do whatever you want.
Right.
Don't have to make any changes, just take the insulin,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So
I've seen it too. It's very disturbing. Let me ask you a related question. I've seen it. My own sister got diabetes as a teenager. And I saw her journey, and her reaction, which I guess is understandable, was anger. Like, why is this happening to me? It's not fair. It's not happening to my siblings. Why is it me? Did you ever go through that stage?
I think for me, my anger, like I said, when I turned 18 was more towards how my doctor was making me feel and that I couldn't finish school and that I couldn't do this. Like I was just such a tunnel vision kid. Also, my siblings are much older than me. You know, they'd moved out and were already in college and school way older than me. So they weren't around when I was really going through this. You know, my brother's 16 years older than me. My sister's much older than me. So, but now that I'm looking back on it, my siblings and I are really close. If anything, they were very supportive of me and would always like come and be with me. There was like nothing but love. I never questioned why it was me and not them. But my sister kind of had her own health issues at the time. Like she broke bones really easily. My sister was always breaking things. So I never thought to myself, oh, why do I have it and not them? Like, I don't know. From what the doctors were saying, they made it sound like it was all my fault somehow. So I don't think I ever took into account genetics, to be honest. I was so young. I was just blaming myself for everything. And I think instead of initially anger, mine was isolation and depression. And then when I started feeling better, that's when I started getting angry about things. Because then I was really like, these people have been lying to me my whole life. Oh my gosh. They made me feel this way about myself. Imagine, it's like
Right.
I think anything, it's like I gave these doctors, my parents, people power to make me hate myself, to make me not feel good about myself. Like, you know, that was a very strong thing for me. It's like I didn't want to feel self-hatred. I was like such a bubbly, happy, naive little girl who just wanted to, you know, live life and succeed and play and all the things. So, yeah.
Wow. So your journey has been amazing in terms of success, as you mentioned, opening up a food co-op, and then, uh, social media, YouTube channels, etc. What do you attribute your resilience? I mean, even going back to this teenage period, because unfortunately, there are other people who have been in your situation and they were not able to figure it out. And let's just be honest, the fact that you figured it out in some ways was luck that you ran into this person at Whole Foods.
It was probably one of my life's greatest blessings, if not the most greatest blessing for me. It changed my whole life. Like that is one of the most, if not the most pivotal moment in my life, having that happen to me.
What has been responsible for your success? Because again, there are some people, and you were describing in your own journey as a teenager. I mean, you had your blackout migraines. You were a rebellious 18-year-old going off to college, which is normal, which can be normal. But but the cool thing is, you not only did you figure it out, you thrived, and that's for the audience, there are a lot of people watching this who are going through their own health journeys right now that are very difficult. And I'm just looking for a few words of wisdom in your own journey, things where I'm sure you hit rock bottom many times. What what helped you just get up and say, you know what, I don't care, I'm going to make this work?
That's a great question. I'm just going to say, as angry as I was with my parents at the time, I give my parents and my grandparents all the credit for my resilience. And I say that only because, my mom's family is Lebanese, my father's family is Ecuadorian, and I grew up with a very fiery family, very passionate people. Like, everybody's always like very intense. When we argue, it's not even like a fight, it's just like intense. My father is one of the most driven people you've ever met. It's like he sees something, he wants it, he does it. He's so smart, so intelligent. And I think what happened with me is that I remember laying in the hospital bed at one point with my dad there with me. And I just remember thinking, if this is the rest of my life, I don't want it. That was a very, very memorable bottom moment for me. I'll never forget that. And I just remember thinking, I don't want this. So I think for me, it had to be a choice. Like, I don't want this. I think the first step in resiliency is choosing that you have to change, or you will do anything possible to make a change. And it's interesting, the moment that I did that, raw food came into the picture shortly after, And so I do think the first thing is like a choice of willing to do whatever it takes, at how long it ever takes, and whatever circumstances it takes. And, I think that because I started feeling so good in the beginning, it was like I wasn't about to give that up. I think people give up on themselves very, very easily. I think people don't have a lot of faith in themselves, right? And they don't have a lot of confidence in themselves, or they want things to be easy. I'm definitely the personality. I wouldn't say it's not that I like a challenge, but like, I will do what is necessary for me to do things and to get them completed. And I took every bit of energy that I had in my brain and was like, all right, we're doing this. So I think that comes from my parents. It was something that was learned. So me speaking to the people who are here, I will just say this. No one is going to be responsible for getting you better except for yourself. Like, no one is coming to save you, right? Not even I was 18, not even my parents could save me at that point. It was like, I think once I realized that it was going to fall completely onto me to make these changes and to make my life better, it was like, oh, no one is going to make these changes for me. No one is going to force feed me. No one's going to do this for me. I have to do this myself. And I think if you can find the strength within yourself to put together a plan, even just a very small plan with tiny changes, and just be committed enough to stick to it, you will see changes. And then once you start feeling inspired, hopefully you'll be more inspired, to make bigger changes, or when you start feeling better. So, Dr. Josh, I don't know if that answers your question,
Oh,
but,
it definitely
you know,
does. It definitely does.
people pull inspiration out of different places, and sometimes people do things for people they love when they don't have the strength to do it for themselves. Even if that's your initial reason, do that. There's so many different ways, but I do know this: no one will do it for you. And so if you can't do it for yourself, you're basically looking at being exactly where you are right now. Are you okay with that? Can you live the rest of your life doing what you're doing now? And if the answer is no, then you got to dig deep and find it somewhere within you to be able to make changes and move forward, because it won't be worth it. I think we can live better. We can live healthier. And it's something that I've learned is, no matter the diagnosis, you can still have a wonderful quality of life, no matter what you're doing, and continue to thrive moving forward. There's so many different things that you can do.
Wow. Yeah, no, your dad shared with me, it was great meeting him. Your dad shared with me that even though he was very skeptical of this change in your diet initially, you actually won him over to change his own diet. So what's powerful is because of your resiliency and basically acknowledging, like, this is up to me. not only were you able to improve your own health, but that of your family. That's just so powerful.
Absolutely. My dad was a small win. Okay. I'm just going to like
Okay.
make you giggle for a second. My dad was a small win. Truth be told, my dad, he fought for me. And like both my parents were like a bit against me doing this in the beginning. But, you know, I think it was after my first year of being in college, we went from spending $20,000-$30,000 a year on my medical bills to nothing. It was so drastic. My dad was like, this is great. I love that. My dad was an easy win. It was my mom who was the hard win because she felt that I was like abandoning us culturally. She didn't know what was wrong with me. I was so weird and different. My mom couldn't handle it. It was so far fetched from everything she knew that my mom and I went through a 4-year period where we barely spoke. She was so, so angry with me. But I'll never forget. It's 1 year, she decided she was going to give it a try, and she did. And Dr. Josh, now look at my mom.
I know.
Like,
She's
now
amazing.
my mom is like hardcore, loves it, wants to do her smoothies and juices all day. She believes in it. Like, my mom was the big win, and I say that because growing up with my mom, it was really challenging. But like now, like seeing my mom and how much she loves it is like my mom was the big win for me.
That's that's
you know,
beautiful. If we can switch gears a little bit, because now you're not focused just on yourself, but you're basically leading a whole community. You run retreats. You do some amazing work out there. My question to you is, in that community, tell me cases that you've seen of people with Alzheimer's or other brain disorders, and specifically, let's talk about diet, because at least for Alzheimer's, there's a controversy. There are some doctors out there who are advocating a keto diet, and then there are other people like me who are like, no, you basically want to focus on low fat plants, including fruit. And what's been your own experience basically with that community?
well, you're the expert with Alzheimer's, so I feel like I'll let you speak on that, but I'll just share with you what I've seen. In the 20 years that I've been doing this, I've met a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of groups. I have my own inner circle coaching community where people come all the time and ask for help. And if we're talking about mental diseases or mental disorders, yes, see people all the time, not just with Alzheimer's, but dementia or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. The list goes on of many different things. I have yet to have one person tell me that they didn't experience some kind of improvement in changing their diet and going raw. And the truth is the extent to how much that they see in terms of improvement depends on two things. Number one, when they come and find me, like, it's like, were you advanced when you found raw food or were you early on in your journey? Both those matter very significantly because being early onset Alzheimer's or dementia is very different than coming and finding raw food when it's progressed to a certain level. And number two is, how far are you willing to take it? Some people just want to do one raw vegan meal a day, and some people go full in, no matter where they are. And, I'll do like more of an umbrella. I come up a little bit higher here is when it really comes down to it, what we're talking about is we're asking people to eat the cleanest possible, most nutritionally dense food and couple it with fitness and exercise and self-care. Like at the core of it, like wrapped in self-love, self-care, all these things. It's bringing it back to oneself. The majority of people who come to me, honestly, are women. So I can't say that I have too much experience around men, but I can say when it comes to women, I see so many women, they just give and they give and they give their whole life. It's almost like they focus so much on everyone else that it's like they've lost the ability to think about themselves in this way. They literally lose their minds not thinking about themselves. And so it's like when we start pulling in these practices of let's eat 3 raw vegan meals a day, like super mineral rich, juicy, hydrating, fiber rich foods, it almost like lights them up. It fires off some things, right? It literally lights up and fires off some things. But it's not just the only thing that helps. I think you have to couple it with exercise and with sleep and with support and safe spaces and community, and even some extra modalities on top of that, depending on where the person is. Like you and I, we've talked about how great hyperbaric chambers are all the time,
Oxygen.
right?
Yes. Amazing.
Oxygen, things like that, sauna therapy, hydrogen therapy, all ozone therapy. I think, depending on where a person's at in their journey, you just have to start doing all the things. I mean, but you can answer this better than anybody, because I'm sure you've seen more people reverse their, their conditions than ever before. But I really believe, and you have shown me this, that we are in a day and age where people can use these tools and they can, if not halt where they're at in their development, but also they can perhaps reverse where they're at.
100%. And let's bring that back to you. And to my mind, it's definitely possible to reverse diabetes, especially type 2 or even 1.5. Type 1 is a lot harder, but let me ask you, do you still measure your blood sugar?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Oh my
Okay.
gosh, no. I am living my best life. I look at that part of my life as a gift.
Right.
Because had I never had diabetes, I never would have found raw food.
That's true.
Like, I look at it as my greatest gift that taught me so much. And I'm like, thank you for the experience that brought me here, because now I am living it up and I have a healthy life that I have been like a thriving life that I've living. And it's given me this beautiful gift that like I can take into my future, that I'm sharing with my family, sharing with my friends, sharing with everyone. It was a gift. And so once I got off insulin, there was something in my mind that was just like, I am never dealing with this again. I have made a choice. Sickness is never my choice. I choose health. I choose life. I choose thriving. I went full force with that, and this is why I say I believe in the power of belief, because if somebody really wants to heal themselves, they will do it.
Right.
And they will find what will will help them do it. I
Right.
do believe raw food is the great path,
Right.
but
But they have to make that decision. Let me ask you, critics out there might say, well, but if you went back to eating the way you grew up before you were 14 years old, guess what? Your diabetes probably would come right back. And
full-fledged,
yes.
absolutely, no question.
Yeah.
I know that now. And you know what? Since then, I've had like 2 of my uncles get diabetes. One passed away from diabetes, when I was in my mid-20s. I had another aunt get diabetes. My grandmother diagnosed with diabetes. So it's like, what's strange is that I was the first one so young, but since then, that my older generation of family have gotten it. So, and now here I am, like telling my grandmother to eat smoothies, do they always listen? I mean, my grandmother, yes. My other aunts and uncles, not so much. But I have inspired many of my cousins to go vegan, which makes me happy. But no question, if I were still eating Lebanese food and fatty foods and all those things, I definitely would be right back where I started. So
And yeah, so it's great. It's great that you made that change. Let me ask you this: do you ever have cravings for the foods you ate before you made this change?
no, 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 no. I haven't had cravings in years, and by years I mean like over 10 years.
That's great. That's
So I'm a firm believer in a few things when it comes to cravings. Number one, I really believe that your body can't crave something that it does not have innately inside of it. I haven't had pizza in 10 years, not like real pizza in 10 years, right? So of course, like my body's like, I don't want it because I'm not missing anything, right? My cells have regenerated. I've created a routine. I've like almost like reprogrammed my taste palette to a certain degree. The things that I crave now are juicy fruits and vegetables, savory dressings, things like that, the things that feel good to me. And I also do think I worked on that mentally within myself, to be able to be like, this is healthy, this is not. Like you go through unlearning and a relearning. And also I think when it comes to cravings as well, I learned very on that the one way that I was going to win over my parents or people that I loved close to me was making food that had the same flavor profiles or that tasted like the foods that we were used to making. So some of my earliest YouTube videos were me making raw tabbouleh, raw fattoush, like trying raw hummus, trying to make the raw vegan versions of things that we grew up with so that they felt like they weren't missing anything. And lo and behold, they ended up loving them so much that they're like, oh, it's just hummus. I'm like, but it's raw. And so that became a tool that I used. And since then, I really realized there's nothing you can't make cooked that you can't make raw. Like, obviously, the only thing that's different really is textures, but flavor profile, well, everything you can mimic.
That's beautiful. And let me ask you, what about, and I guess some of this is definition, but fully raw, like aren't cashews aren't technically fully raw. What are your thoughts there? You know, people might say, oh, you're not fully raw if you're eating cashews.
Oh, I'm just like, okay, I have so many, I kind of roll my eyes at these kinds of things because it's just like, first of all, yes, not all cashews are raw, but I mean, it's because I've been raw for so long, I actually know people who have companies who go through the process of low dry heat cracking them. And like, for instance, Divine Organics, right? They go through their whole process of like selling truly raw cashews. So I'm like, all right, guys, it's like, it's really an obsessive deal for you. Go buy from this place, this place, this place. These are all like small, I don't want to say family owned, but like small enough companies that have like intentionally sourced and wholesale or distributing these things so that you can find raw versions of them. And then secondly, well, I have 3 points here. The second point is, you know, if cashews is a deal breaker, find another nut. Okay. There's plenty of other raw nuts out there. Let's not talk about cashews if like it's going to keep you from eating raw food. But the truth is like those cashews were probably much better than you eating a raw burger anyway. So if we're going to sit here and talk about whether those cashews were heated or not, those like cashews that were, and the only reason people say they're not raw is because in the process of cracking commercial cashews out of their shell, they're heated. Doesn't always have to be the case, right? For some people who found a way beyond it. But yeah, if those cashews are still probably better than ice cream that you would have been eating at the store, whatever. And, the third thing behind that is I have found that the raw vegan crowd definitely attracts a lot of extremists, and people who really miss the point of what we're doing sometimes. And if the point is really to step into a place that's healthier and to get you to try new things and be excited about it, if you have all these people who are like, well, that's not really raw, don't do that, or like, you can't food combine that and do that. People who are just trying to better their lives get so overwhelmed with all of these rules that they end up just saying, you know what, forget it. I'm going to go back to eating pizza. And I almost feel like that's defeating the purpose of all this. Like, and so it's like in the beginning, let's just get people to be introduced to raw food and to have fun. We can worry about all the details after they get used to it. We can worry about food combining and raw cashews versus not raw cashews in the beginning. Like, my goal is I want this to be fun and easy for people so that they can actually see themselves doing this for the rest of their life. Because if they can see that, they will be willing to actually learn about all these other details in between. Because most people don't have that extreme mental drive where they're just going to be obsessed about all things, right? So my goal is like, let's just get them through the door. Let's welcome them in. And then let's gently introduce some sourcing and some helpful tips later on so that they can continue to improve upon their journey. That's more of my approach with things. So I hope that explains,
That makes perfect sense. Were there any questions I should have asked that I didn't?
Oh, what are questions you should have asked? I don't know. I actually have some questions for you.
Okay.
I want to know, because this is your specialty and it's a gift to all of us to be able to learn from you. what benefits have you most seen from people eating raw vegan in their mental health? Because, you know, you talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and all of these very fancy scientific things all day, but like we're talking about the most basic of basic things here, which is like eating raw food. How have you seen this impact people's lives?
Yeah, so it's actually very personal, and I'm going to have another episode. My own brother developed schizophrenia in his early age, in his 20s, and the only way he was able to reverse his schizophrenia, it wasn't medications. It turned out he went raw vegan, and that was the only thing that reverses schizophrenia. Actually, he was homeless. I mean, it was a really sad time, but it's a good ending, and I'm going to have my brother on this podcast soon. So I won't go more in details of that. So stay tuned on that one. But I would say both at True North and at Hippocrates, when I see people eat raw, many of their chronic diseases go away. And again, to my mind, it's not, well, I think the biggest part is they're not eating the processed garbage, the animal products that are inflammatory. I think what's most important is what they're not doing. And that's why at True North with fasting, where I was for 3 years, I saw people with all these different chronic conditions. Those chronic conditions went away when they were water fasting. And I think that's because when you're water fasting, you're not taking in all these awful inflammatory animal products, salt, oil, and sugar. But at Hippocrates, with a raw diet, literally within a week, I'm seeing many chronic conditions: the high blood pressure, the high glucose from insulin resistance. I'm seeing that go away. Now, you're exactly right. If you've had this chronically for many years, not all the problems are going to go away overnight, but literally within a week, I'm seeing dramatic improvement. And and I've got to tell you, this was not something I learned in medical school. This is something I learned just working in these clinics with people in the real world and seeing it. And another place I've seen the amazing the amazing results of going raw was going to a Woodstock Fruit Festival for a week last year here in Florida, where literally some of the healthiest people I've ever seen were fruitarians. All they eat is fruit. And they're some of the skinniest, athletic, healthiest people I've seen. So if I ever hear like, oh, fruitarians are people who eat fruit, fruit is not good for you, it's got too much sugar, they don't understand that basically, yeah, definitely you want to stay away from processed sugars, but not if you're eating whole fruits, it's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I would the Woodstock Festival is filled with amazing, healthy people. And if I could add to that really quickly, just talking about stigmas really quickly, I'm just, I think when people think about vegan, they have a judgment in their mind about who people are, or raw vegan or fruitarian people have judgments. But I mean, the truth is the healthiest people that I have ever met have been eating this way. And so it's, I just think that that's so inspiring because oftentimes, and I say this with grace and love, but people want to change their diet so that they can look a certain way. They want to look sexy. They want to look fit, tone, lean, skinny, whatever. I mean, they focus on the physical exterior. But the work that you're doing is work that people can't see from the inside out. Only the person who's experiencing it in their body and in here knows what's happening. And that's like really profound, right? And so even though we're talking about mental disorders, I don't even like saying that because I'm like, it's just a person on their journey. They're healing. Everybody can relate to this because whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia or schizophrenia or whatever it might be, everyone can still relate to having depression, a lack of confidence, sadness, anything that's up here. It can all be very much related, and I do believe that raw food is food that loves you back. It's such a loving food. And I tell people all the time, because, I have women who come to me, they're like, I don't love myself. I have no confidence. I've lost myself and my family and my kids and whatnot. And I usually tell them, I was like, just start eating the raw food. just start eating it. Even if you don't love yourself now, as like you will eventually eating this food. Like you're literally putting life back into yourself by eating this food. You're eating super high nutrient food that's so forgiving, right? So forgiving with no restriction, no guilt, no shame. And it is the beginning to the journey of learning how to self-love. And even with all of that, I find that people who hate themselves in the beginning when they eat raw, they end up learning how to love themselves again, right? It like lifts that cloud of depression. It like actually helps them to hone in and to develop more tools to change their lives so they can step out of depression or lift the cloud of whatever might be in there for other things like dementia, Alzheimer's, and help improve them. So it's one of the greatest tools that we have. And I do also believe that it helps guide us towards more self-care, more self-love.
That's beautiful. Wow. So FullyRaw Kristina, if people want to reach you, I, where can they find you on social media? And you've
Oh,
got amazing retreats and yeah.
thank you. You can find me on my website at fullyraw.com. That's pretty easy, but you can also search YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, Pinterest at FullyRaw Kristina.
Awesome.
That's it. Fully,
And then same thing with social media. You said Kristina. Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
FullyRaw Kristina with a K.
With the K.
That's me.
Wow. So you're exactly right. When people adopt a raw diet and cut out the animal products, fortunately, their inflammation goes down. If they cut out the added fats, the inflammation goes down. If they're in depression, the depression goes down. We know that one of the root causes of Alzheimer's is inflammation. The inflammation goes down. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today, and definitely have to have you back because yeah, I'm just so grateful that you were here today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. This has been an honor and a pleasure. And Dr. Josh, your work is so needed in the world. Please keep it moving. We're here to support you. We love you. And thank you for the honor of having me on today.
Peace and plants.